This video is brought to you by Skillshare. More on them later in the video. One of my favorite videos I've done on the channel in the last few months was one I did on a bit of a whim. It was turning Nintendo characters into Spider-Man Miles Morales villains. And I kinda wanna try something like that again. But instead of just making villains for Spider-Man, I thought, why not make villains for a bunch of different superheroes, both in Marvel and DC? And because a few trailers have come out recently for Disney's new animated movie, Raya and the Last Dragon, I thought, okay, why not work with some of Disney's finest and turn some Disney princesses into supervillains? Seems like a fun combination to work with. Let's see if it is. Let's go. Hit like if you want, subscribe if you feel like, but either way, enjoy the show. When Rapunzel became a villain to the Teen Titans, it hit them all hard. Not because she was more vicious than their other foes, but because they'd once considered making her a part of their team. But they'd failed her. See, Rapunzel had been experimented on as a child in a horrible place called Gothel Labs, and grew up in captivity, being tested and altered to become a living weapon. She'd been given some base-level abilities such as strength and speed, but the most dangerous ability she had was her hair. It grew non-stop and also seemed to take on a mind of its own. It would lash out and attack people seemingly at random. This was a serious problem for her, but it did give her an opportunity to escape her captors. She fled and found herself in Jump City, but in the panic and confusion about the outside world, her hair lashed out and began attacking civilians. The Titans obviously came to the cries for help and started fighting her, until they realized just how distressed she was. They managed to bind her hair and bring her back to the tower to try and figure out if her powers could be controlled. They wanted to help, but it was a slow process. While there were times where she could control it, often it would just attack the Titans and cause serious damage. And keeping it restrained became more and more of a problem, as it seemed strong enough to eventually just break whatever bonds they put on it. They spent weeks trying to help her, but of course they also couldn't let her leave the tower in that time. If she were to go out into the world, there was no guarantee her hair wouldn't attack and kill innocents. At first, Rapunzel appreciated the Titans trying to help her, but the longer she was locked away in the tower, the less it felt like help, and the more she just felt like she was being held captive once again. And soon, someone would come to push her over the edge. The arch-villain of the Titans, Slade, had been keeping tabs on the situation, and while the Titans were out one day, he snuck into the tower to see Rapunzel. He told her she was incredible and she deserved to be free. He said the only way to learn control over her powers was to do it out in the world, and that all the anger she felt at the Titans and those that had wronged her was the key to controlling her ability. The Titans returned as the conversation was happening, but it was too late. The idea had sunk into Rapunzel's mind, and she struck out against the Teen Titans, seriously injuring all of them and destroying the top floors of the tower where she felt she'd been held captive. She fled with Slade, and together they worked on honing her powers and prepared for a war with the heroes of Jump City. Now for Rapunzel here, I was taking inspiration from a few different sources. Not just from Teen Titans villains, but from some other stuff as well. First off, I was obviously taking inspiration from Terra and Slade in Teen Titans, Slade being Deathstroke if we're not talking about the animated series. Because I was kind of writing Rapunzel in as a replacement for Terra. Like, this is a character that teams up with the Titans for a bit, then betrays them, goes to work with Slade, and then fights against them, and then maybe later on teams up with them again, who knows. I didn't really plan much beyond what I wrote in this episode. But the other main source of inspiration was actually Medusa from the Inhumans in Marvel Comics, because she's got this power that I wrote Rapunzel as having, where her hair is like this crazy, sentient, monstrous thing that she can use to attack people. And I was using drawings of her done by Joe Madureira as my main inspiration, because he does such cool stuff with her in his art style, which is very exaggerated and wild. It's just super, super cool, and provided so much creative fuel for this design, which honestly turned into one of my favorite supervillain designs I think I've done. Anyway, here's the finished version. Hope y'all like it. The mystical city of Kunlun had long held the molten heart of the dragon Xiao Lao, before Danny Rand, now known as the Iron Fist, defeated the dragon and took its power. But little did he know, with that action he'd killed all except one of the dragons left alive on Earth. Farther southeast in the continent was another hidden land called Kamandra. But when word came to this land that they now housed the last dragon on the planet, they became drastically divided on how to handle the situation. Some wanted to hide the dragon away deeper in the earth, some wanted to simply fortify it more where it was, and others even wanted to kill it to ensure no outsiders came to attack them looking for it in their homeland. Before a decision could be made, a small band of dragon guardians took her away from Kamandra to try and keep her safe. But they were attacked. Once they'd left the safety of Kamandra, they were found by assassins of the Hand, sent from America by the kingpin of crime, Wilson Fisk, to capture the creature to be his own personal pet and weapon. For weeks, the people of Kamandra had no idea what had happened, but one young dragon guardian in training, named Raya, was determined to find out. She scoured the areas around Kamandra looking for any signs of the dragon. Finally, she'd find the wreckage from the Hand attack and piece together what had happened. Then she'd set off to America to continue her hunt. But by the time she got there, it would be too late. See, Fisk had not only captured the dragon, but had trained it through shock therapy to fight for him. When some of New York's greatest defenders came to take down Fisk, he set the beast on them. Thinking that it was just a mindless beast Fisk had trained to do his bidding, they slayed the creature before once more failing to take down the crime lord. Once Raya figured out what had happened to the creature that she'd been raised to protect one day, she swore vengeance, not just on Fisk, but on the so-called defenders who'd mercilessly killed the last dragon. She continued to train by taking on the Hand in New York, using her agility and strength and her incredible sword whip to cut through swaths of the ninjas. The more she fought, the stronger and angrier she got. Soon she'd be ready to take down both the villains and heroes of Hell's Kitchen. Now for Raya here, there were obviously a few limitations because this is the one movie that I haven't seen. At the time I'm making this, the movie's not out yet. What I did know that I wanted to do was make her a villain for the Defenders, because first of all, I haven't done very much stuff with the Defenders characters, even though I do think a lot of them are really cool. And as soon as I started thinking about the last dragon element of her story, I started thinking about Iron Fist and how he killed a dragon, stuck his fists in its molten heart to get his powers. And that felt like an easy way to transition in characters from the Raya and the Last Dragon movie. So for her design, I was taking inspiration from Daredevil and Elektra, and a little bit from Ronin. Not Ronin the Accuser, but Ronin as in the guy that Hawkeye very, very briefly is in Avengers Endgame. I haven't read tons of stuff with him in it in the comics before, like 1 or 2 comics where he shows up in Ultimate Spider-Man, but I do really love his design a lot of the time. For this, I hadn't originally drawn in her hat, but at the very end I go in and add it, because it felt like she was looking a little bit too luchador-like, and I thought adding the hat in there would give it a little bit more Asian influence looking. So once I get the hat thrown in there, I really like how this one turned out. Hope you all like it as well. Here's the finished result. Gonna interrupt for a couple minutes just to talk about something that I think will be incredibly useful for anyone that's interested in becoming a professional in any kind of creative field. Part of the reason for this is because the sponsor of today's video is Skillshare, but also just because I think this is really useful information if you haven't heard it before. See, as a lot of people who watch this channel know, before I started running this channel full-time, I worked professionally for around 7 years as an animator, illustrator, and motion graphics designer, editor, whole bunch of different things. And the reason I managed to get a lot of different creative jobs wasn't because I was an incredible animator or motion graphics designer or illustrator, it was because I was good at a whole bunch of different things. See, lots of people looking to hire creatives out there are looking for people that can do a bunch of different creative tasks. Luckily, the sponsor of today's video, Skillshare, is a site where you can learn how to do tons of different creative things. In case you don't know, Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of classes for creative and curious people to help you improve your current skills or to learn new ones or to just try out some new creative projects. They've got classes on everything creative: illustration, animation, filmmaking, photography, creative writing, graphic design. If you want to become a more well-rounded creative, Skillshare is a great place to do that. Right now, I'm personally going through Writing with Expression, How to Make Your Words More Artful and Lyrical by Hanif Abdurraqib, to try and make my writing for the stories on this channel a little bit more interesting and eloquent and poetic. With an annual subscription, Skillshare is less than $10 a month, which is a fantastic deal considering all the awesome stuff you can learn how to do on Skillshare. And because they're sponsoring today's video, the first 1,000 people to click the link in the description will get a free trial of premium membership so you can explore your creativity. If you haven't tried out Skillshare before, I highly recommend it. They're one of the few sponsors I take on this channel because I do genuinely really believe in them. But anyway, sorry for the interruption, let's get back into the stories and artwork. The oceans are filled with incredible creatures and species, but also with some pretty horrific ones. In the darkest depths of the seas live the creatures of the trench, monstrous, devolved beasts who feed on anything that finds its way to their home. But there is one different being among them who lives free of threat. One who proved to be worthy of ruling over the creatures of the trench. Ariel. See, Ariel had at a time lived in the glorious underwater fisherman kingdom as one of the many proud royals, but she'd been all too curious about the world of humans. Years ago, it had been forbidden for any sentient ocean dwellers to visit the surface world, but Ariel's curiosity got the best of her. She'd spent her early years as a hoarder of any surface artifacts that sunk to their depths, and eventually her obsession broke her. She had to be a part of their world. But having a tail in place of legs would make that difficult to do. So she struck a bargain with the Sea Witch, who at the time was the queen of the trench, Ursula. Ariel was temporarily given a human body in exchange for her voice, but she was also only given 1 month to find true love on the surface, or else. Being a foolish child, Ariel believed she could succeed at this, but she found no such mate. In fact, she found the world of man to be cruel and full of selfish, cynical people who were nothing like she'd dreamed. She was horrified that this was the dominant species of the planet. She thought them to be vile. As a month had passed, she returned to the sea, but because she'd failed, she didn't revert to her past body. Instead, she mutated into a horrific hybrid of her former body and of a creature from the trench. She went to the Fisherman Kingdom for help, but they couldn't understand her as her voice hadn't been returned, but replaced with a monstrous cry. They chased her off, and she was left alone. All she had was her mutated form, shattered dreams, and a lust for revenge, both on the witch who'd cursed her and on the world of man. She trained in her new mutated form, then returned to the trench. She slayed Ursula, then battled swarms of the trench, showing herself to be the true alpha of their species. The remaining trench bowed to her and followed her commands. She sent them to storm coastal surface towns and slayed every human in sight, while she watched from the seas below. Aquaman would be the first to step in, but it would soon be clear that this was a mission for the entire Justice League, and even with the most powerful heroes fighting, it would be a long war to stop Ariel's army of the deep. Now this character was actually the very first idea I had for this video, because I really wanted to draw some kind of fish creature, and I really love the creatures of the trench. So I knew it was going to be a lot of fun taking some cutesy princess elements and working them into some kind of mermaid sea monster beast thing. This one I also knew I wanted to play around with the colors a lot. After the fact, I didn't do as much detailing in the inks. I did it a similar way to how I would do, how I did the My Hero Academia fish episode, or how I would draw dinosaurs or something, do a bit less inking, and then add some cool color textures in the coloring stage. Also, if you ever want to make a character's eyes pop a lot more and make them look a bit more menacing, add some kind of black around their eyes, because that makes the light parts of their eyes really stand out and pop, and you're more likely to direct people's eyes straight to that, and it just naturally makes people look a little bit more edgy and cool and creepy. For a drawing that didn't take super long, I really like how this turned out. Hope y'all do too. For as long as they've been heroes, the Fantastic Four have fended off the likes of Doctor Doom and whatever dark forces he could use from the country he ruled over, Latveria. Little did they know, another similar kingdom would soon cause them even more problems. Farther north to Doom's land was the humble nation of Arendelle. This was a land with a mysterious magical energy to it, and Doom had always craved its power. He wanted the region for his own to commit his mystic experiments so he could keep his own citizens safe from them. He initially tried to buy the country, but when that was refused, he tried invading. But even that was a fool's errand. Arendelle may have been small, but it had a significant military force that managed to hold back Doom's army, but not before he managed to kill the king and queen. This meant the eldest princess, Elsa, was to be rushed through training to take the throne. But at this point, Doom took a more subtle approach. He used magic to sneak into the kingdom and found Elsa. But as he tried to kill the girl, her sister Anna leapt in front of the blast and was struck dead in an instant. This seemed like only a minor misstep, but it would mean Doom's end. You see, Elsa her whole life had withheld her own magical abilities. Her repressing these powers was what had made it seem like Arendelle had a magical presence. But now that Doom had taken her parents and her sister from her, Elsa's rage overtook her, and she unleashed all her might. She created an army of mindless frozen minions, and with full control over the cold, she defeated Doom and froze him in a block of ice, leaving him in her castle's entryway as a sign of what happens when you scorn the Queen of Arendelle. But her rage wasn't sated. It wasn't just Doom who'd played a part in her parents' end, it was his whole army, his kingdom of Latveria. She led her icy minions to Doom's land and began slaying everyone in sight, not just soldiers, but civilians as well. So in an unexpected turn, the Fantastic Four had to step in to try and save Latveria. Johnny Storm's firepower was a significant help, but his might was nowhere near that of Elsa's. Eventually, more and more heroes would have to be called in to try and stop the reign of the Ice Queen. Now, it's become apparent to me in the last little while that I really love using Doctor Doom elements in different characters and stories and stuff like that. I used Doctor Doom in the Spider-Man Miles Morales episode, worked my supervillain Princess Peach into his story a little bit, and that was lots of fun, and making Elsa into some kind of royal supervillain, kind of like Doom with magical abilities, felt like a really natural transition and was super fun to do. For her mask, I didn't want to take Doom inspiration, I actually took more inspiration from Ocean Master, who, you know, he's kind of a royal character as well. I mean, he's DC, but still, you know, I'm doing a lot of cross-design idea kind of things. I also, on a whim, added the blue veins to Elsa's arms to make her a little bit more menacing, and I think that ended up being a nice element of this. And also, for this whole episode, I really liked how I ended up drawing all the characters' faces. Maybe this one the least of all of them, but in the Nintendo Spider-Man Villains episode, I really messed up Princess Peach's face, and I said that I wanted to work on how I draw female faces. I've done that since, and I'm really liking how I draw a lot of female characters now. Anyway, that's kind of a tangent, but I hope you all like how this drawing turned out. Here's the final princess villain. This might be one of my new favorite kinds of videos to do on the channel. Turning things into supervillains just has a little bit more of an edge to it than turning them into superheroes. And making characters into villains for a specific team of superhero or a specific individual superhero gives me some fun plot elements to work with. Give me more suggestions for who or what you'd like to see turned into villains in the comments below, and maybe even specifically what team or character you'd like them to be a villain for. And if you're new to the channel, make sure to go check out the Spider-Man Miles Morales Nintendo Villains episode. That's a really fun one. And I've got lots of other superhero and villain stuff on the channel. I'll link a playlist of my superhero videos at the end of this episode. But anyway, everybody, that's all for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Christian Pearson. This has been PopCross Studios, home of the nerdiest art videos on YouTube. Thanks again to Skillshare for sponsoring this episode, and I will see you all in the next video on Monday. Goodbye.